Chapter 1. The Meeting That Wasn't About Family. This started as a family meeting. Coffee on the table, familiar faces, gentle voices. They told me it was just paperwork, nothing serious. But when my brother slid the papers toward me and my mother said, "Don't embarrass this family," I realized something was very wrong. Because buried in that contract was a way to erase me quietly, legally, and forever. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I pressed record. My name is Eleanor, and this is the moment I stopped protecting my family and started protecting myself. I'm 46 years old, and until recently, I believed that staying calm was a kind of protection. My name is Eleanor Pierce, and for most of my adult life, I have been the person in my family who kept things smooth. I was the one who adjusted my tone, softened my words, and stepped in when tensions started to rise. I told myself that maturity meant knowing when not to push back. I live in Evanston, Illinois, a quiet stretch just north of Chicago, where the lake wind cuts through winter coats and summer evenings feel borrowed. I work as a compliance manager for a regional healthcare services company. My days are filled with policies, risk assessments, and fine print. I read contracts for a living. I am trained to notice what is implied rather than stated, what could go wrong if someone signs too quickly. It is work built on caution and restraint, and it suits me. At home, that same instinct followed me home. I was not the child who demanded attention or praise. I was the one who handled things. When something needed to be done, I did it. When no one wanted to have a difficult conversation, I carried it quietly. My father, Thomas Pierce, saw that side of me. He passed away in late 2019 after a long period of declining health. During those last years, I was the one who took him to appointments, sorted his medications, and answered the phone late at night when he was confused or afraid. I helped pay for repairs on the family house when problems started stacking up. I never asked for acknowledgement. I assumed it was understood. After he died, the house remained with my mother, Linda Pierce, who was already nearing 70 at the time. My older brother Mark lived across town with his wife Jenna. Life settled into something that looked stable on the surface. We spoke regularly. We showed up for holidays. No one raised their voice. That was enough for me to believe things were fine. In the early spring of 2024, my mother called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was gentle but deliberate, the way it becomes when she has already decided how a conversation will end. She said we needed to have a family meeting. She said it was nothing dramatic, just some paperwork related to the house. She said it would be easier if we handled it together. She said she wanted peace of mind. I remember standing in my kitchen, the counter cold against my hip, listening carefully to every word. Something in her tone made me pause, but the habit of obligation kicked in before doubt could settle. I told her I would come by on Saturday. The house I grew up in sits on a quiet street in Wilmette, Illinois, lined with tall trees and sidewalks that still carry echoes of old routines. When I arrived, the front door was already open. The smell of fresh coffee and bread drifted out to meet me. Everything looked exactly the same. The familiarity should have comforted me, but instead it made me uneasy. Mark greeted me with an enthusiasm that felt practiced. He hugged me tightly and told me how good it was to see me. Jenna followed, smiling and talking about how nice it was to finally get everyone together. My mother hovered near the dining table, straightening papers that were already neatly stacked. We sat down together, 4 chairs around the same table where we had shared thousands of meals. At first, the conversation stayed light. Work updates, weather complaints, a neighbor who had recently moved. It felt almost normal. Then my mother slid a folder toward the center of the table. She explained that she had been advised to simplify things, to clean up paperwork while she was still healthy. Mark nodded along, saying it was just a formality. Jenna added that it was better to handle these things now rather than leave confusion later. Their voices overlapped in agreement, creating a sense of momentum I had not consented to. I opened the folder and began to read. The language was dense but familiar, full of phrases about restructuring and clarity. I slowed down, scanning each line carefully. That was when the temperature in the room changed. Mark leaned back and said that I didn't really need the house anyway. He said I was doing well on my own. He said this was about fairness. Jenna looked at me with practiced concern and said our mother had been under a lot of stress. She said this would help her feel secure. She said families sometimes had to make sacrifices. I asked what exactly the document meant for me. The response was immediate and sharp. Mark said if I truly loved my mother, I would sign that night and not drag things out. He said I was making it harder than it needed to be. My mother pushed a pen across the table toward me and told me not to embarrass the family by turning it into a conflict. In that moment, everything became clear. This was not a discussion, it was a decision already made, one they expected me to accept quietly. The warmth from earlier disappeared, replaced with something transactional and cold. I felt my chest tighten, not with anger, but with recognition. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse anyone. I said I needed time to review the paperwork properly, and that I would get back to them. My tone stayed even, controlled. As I spoke, my hand slipped into my bag and pressed the record button on my phone. The movement was small and unremarkable. Years of professional training had taught me that when pressure appears, documentation matters. Mark scoffed. Jenna avoided my eyes. My mother sighed as if I had failed some unspoken test. I stood, thanked them for the coffee, and walked out. Outside, the evening was still. The streetlights flickered on as I crossed the driveway. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine, letting the quiet settle around me. I played back a few seconds of the recording. I heard impatience in Mark's voice. I heard the edge in my mother's words. For the first time, I heard my family speaking to me not as a daughter or sister, but as an obstacle. I drove home slowly, with the radio off, the weight of realization settling in. I was not being asked to help. I was being asked to disappear politely. When I reached my apartment, I placed the folder on my desk and sat down across from it. I did not feel the urge to call anyone or defend myself. What I felt instead was something quieter and steadier. This had not been a family meeting. It had been a test. And for the first time, I understood that staying calm didn't mean staying unprotected.
Chapter 2. Silence They Didn't Expect. The morning after we left, I understood how quickly silence gets misinterpreted. By breakfast, my phone had already been rewritten into a story where I was irrational and temporary. I woke before the kids in the small extended stay room we had checked into late the night before. The curtains did not quite close all the way, and early light spilled across the carpet. For a moment, everything felt neutral. Then I reached for my phone. There were missed calls from my parents and several messages stacked on top of each other. My mother had written that we needed to talk calmly. My father had left a short message saying I was taking things too far. My brother Mark sent a text close to midnight saying everyone was tired and this would blow over if I stopped reacting emotionally. No one asked where we were. No one asked if the kids had slept. The assumption was clear. I would come back. I always did. That belief did not come from nowhere. It had been trained into them. When Ethan and Lily woke up, they moved differently than they had the day before. Ethan was quiet and focused, already mentally preparing for school. Lily watched me closely while she brushed her hair, like she was trying to understand the shape of what we had stepped into. We dropped them off, and I drove without music for several minutes before pulling into a small coffee shop. I did not open my laptop to work. I opened it to steady myself with facts. The house had been purchased in 2010. At the time, it was a shared decision, practical and cautious. In 2012, when refinancing became necessary, the deed had been placed solely in my name because my credit and income were stronger. My parents had thanked me and said it was just paperwork. By 2019, the mortgage was paid off. I remembered that day clearly. I had printed the confirmation and placed it in a fire-resistant box, along with the deed, tax records, and insurance documents. Not because I expected conflict, because organization had always been my way of staying safe. Over the years, language shifted. My father would say things like, "You are holding the house for us," or "This is still the family place." My brother repeated it often enough that it became accepted truth. Even I had stopped correcting it. That morning, I stopped agreeing. The phone rang while I sat there. It was my mother. I answered. She spoke quickly, telling me she had not slept, that my father was under stress, that this situation was affecting his health. She asked if that was what I wanted. I told her calmly that I was not discussing the house by phone. I said future communication would need to go through appropriate channels. She paused, clearly startled, then said I was being cold and dramatic. An hour later, Mark called. His tone was irritated, not concerned. He said this was unnecessary. He said the kids could handle the basement for a while. He said he just needed time. I asked him what he needed time for. He said work, finances, stability. I reminded him that I had managed all of those things without family intervention for years. He accused me of being unfair. That was when I realized they were not negotiating. They were waiting me out. I contacted an attorney that afternoon. Her name was Dana Keller, a property and family law specialist recommended by a colleague. I explained the situation. She listened carefully and asked practical questions. She confirmed what I already knew. I was the legal owner. Occupancy without a lease still required formal notice. 30 days was standard. She asked if I wanted to proceed. I said yes without hesitation. Dana drafted the notice that evening. It was brief and factual. It stated that the right to reside at the property would end in 30 days and that all communication should go through her office. There were no accusations, no explanations, no emotional language. The notice was sent by certified mail the next morning. That was the moment the panic began. My mother called crying, asking how I could involve lawyers against family. She said she never thought I would go this far. I told her calmly that family should not require children to live in unsafe conditions. Mark left a voicemail asking for a few more months, just until things stabilized. He said this would ruin him. Dana responded with the same calm language every time. 30 days, no extensions. At dinner that night, Ethan told me something quietly. He said Grandma had told Aunt Julia that I had abandoned them. He said it without anger, just observation. Lily asked why people lied when the truth was simpler. I told her sometimes the truth costs more than they want to pay. Over the next few days, messages slowed. The certainty drained out of them. The pressure shifted. Something else changed too. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. I stopped rehearsing arguments. I stopped trying to explain myself to people who were not listening. Silence, paired with boundaries, felt solid. At the end of the week, Dana forwarded a message from my mother asking to meet in person. She said they just wanted to talk. I did not respond. There would be a conversation eventually, but it would not happen on their terms. For now, the line was drawn. Chapter 3. Paper tells a different story. Understanding changed the way I moved through the next few days. I no longer checked my phone out of habit. I checked it with intention. I stopped asking myself how to keep everyone calm and started asking what I needed to know. On Thursday afternoon, I took the train into the city and walked the last few blocks to Patricia Sloane's office. The building was narrow and quiet, tucked between two glass towers. Inside, everything smelled faintly of paper and coffee. It felt like a place where decisions were made without drama. Patricia greeted me with a nod and gestured toward the chair across from her desk. I set my bag down and spread out the documents I had been organizing at home. I brought everything I could find, I said. Receipts, statements, records. She glanced over the piles, then looked up at me. That is exactly what we need, she said. Let's walk through this slowly. We started with the basics. She asked when the house had been purchased, who was listed on the original title, and how the refinancing had been handled. I answered carefully, pulling dates and figures from memory and from my notes. 1998, I said. My parents bought it after my brother and I moved out. They refinanced in 2016 to cover medical costs and repairs. Patricia nodded and made notes. Based on recent assessments, the current value is around $620,000, she said. That aligns with what you were told. She slid one page back toward me and pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. This clause is the key issue, she said. The quitclaim removes your interest entirely. Combined with the power of attorney provision, it grants immediate authority. Immediate, I repeated. Yes, not conditional, not delayed. Immediate. The word settled heavily in the room. So, if I signed, my brother could act on my behalf without my consent. That is correct, Patricia said. And if you were ever considered temporarily unable to make decisions, control would default to him. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, but recognition. This was never about simplicity, I said. No, it was about control, dressed up as concern. I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the desk. I recorded part of the meeting, I said. I did not plan to, it just happened. Patricia's expression did not change. That may be very important, she said. In Illinois, recording a conversation you are part of is legal, especially when there is evidence of pressure. She listened carefully as I played the recording. The room filled with voices I knew too well. My brother's impatience, my mother's insistence, the subtle shift from request to demand. When the recording ended, Patricia leaned back in her chair. This supports your position, she said. There is clear emotional pressure. That matters. Hearing her say it out loud made something in me settle. Until then, part of me still framed the situation as a family misunderstanding. Now it had structure, it had intent. That night, I met my friend Claire for dinner at a small restaurant near my apartment. We sat by the window, the city moving past us in soft blurs of light. "You look steadier," she said, after a moment, like something clicked. I told her about the attorney, the documents, the recording. I told her how the pieces fit together once I stopped viewing them through a family lens. Claire listened quietly, then nodded. "My family tried something similar," she said. "They framed it as protection. They said I was too emotional to handle things myself." "What did you do?" I asked. "At first, I fought back," she said. "I explained. I defended myself. It only made me look unstable. The shift happened when I stopped reacting and started preparing." Her words echoed what Patricia had told me earlier. "Preparation changes the power dynamic," Shara said. "When they realize you are not panicking, they lose leverage." Over the next several days, I focused on preparation. I built a timeline of payments and repairs. I scanned receipts from the years my father was sick, when I covered expenses without question. I labeled everything clearly. Late one evening, I listened to the recording again. This time, it did not hurt. It sounded procedural. Pressure followed by guilt followed by ultimatum. The pattern was unmistakable. I realized then that my family did not need me to sign right away. They needed me to believe I had no alternative. Once that belief cracked, their urgency lost its force. A few days later, my phone buzzed with another message from my brother. "We need to resolve this," he wrote. "Mom is exhausted. You cannot drag this out forever." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "I agree we need clarity," I typed. "I am willing to meet one last time to discuss this properly, in person, with a neutral third party present." The response came quickly. "Good. I knew you'd come around." I did not correct him. I suggested a meeting at a local notary office the following week, somewhere public, somewhere structured. I framed it as a way to make sure everything was handled correctly. My brother agreed without hesitation. My mother sent a brief message saying she hoped this would finally bring peace. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. For the first time since that afternoon at the dining table, I felt the balance shift. I was not preparing to convince anyone. I was preparing to end a pattern that had gone unchallenged for years. The meeting ahead was no longer about approval or reconciliation. It was about closing a door carefully and on my own terms. And for the first time, I felt ready to do exactly that. Chapter 4. The signing that never happened. The following Tuesday morning arrived colder than expected, the kind of sharp Illinois cold that wakes you up before the coffee does.
I dressed carefully, not because I wanted to make an impression, but because I wanted to feel grounded in my own body. I chose neutral colors, a coat with deep pockets, shoes that did not make noise when I walked. Everything about the day felt deliberate. The notary office was in Skokie, a few blocks off a main road, wedged between a shipping store and a small bakery. The sign outside was modest, easy to miss. I arrived early again, parked across the street, and sat in my car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. I reminded myself that I was not here to negotiate my worth. I was here to end something. Inside, the office was quiet and unremarkable. Beige walls, a small waiting area, one conference table in the center. The notary, a man named Daniel Moore, stood when I entered. He looked to be in his late 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice trained to remain neutral. We exchanged brief greetings. I handed him my identification and took a seat at the table. I placed my bag at my feet and rested my hands in my lap. Everything I needed was inside. When the door opened again, my family walked in together. My brother Mark entered first, confident and fast, like he was already late for something. His wife Jenna followed closely, her hand resting lightly on his arm. My mother came last, moving slower, her eyes already heavy. She did not look at me right away. We sat, Mark directly across from me, Jenna angled toward my mother. Daniel took his place at the head of the table and opened the folder. Before he could speak, Mark leaned forward. "We really just want to get this done," he said. "Mom needs closure." My mother nodded slightly. "I am so tired. I cannot handle more uncertainty." Jenna added quietly, "Her doctor said stress is not good for her right now." I watched them as they spoke, noticing how seamlessly the roles fell into place. Pressure from one side, sympathy from the other, all aimed in the same direction. Daniel cleared his throat. "My role here is limited," he said. "I need to confirm that everyone is participating voluntarily." Mark gestured toward me. "That depends on her," he said. Daniel turned to me. "Miss Pierce," he said, "are you prepared to proceed today?" I took a breath and reached into my bag. I placed my own folder on the table. "I am prepared," I said, "but not to sign what you have in front of you." The air changed immediately. Mark frowned. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means I have reviewed these documents carefully," I said, "and I have had them reviewed by an estate attorney." Jenna stiffened. "You did not say you were bringing a lawyer into this," she said. "I did not need to," I replied. Mark let out a short laugh. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said. "You were turning a family matter into a legal fight." "I am responding to a legal request," I said, "not creating one." I opened my folder and slid a summary across the table. "This outlines the quitclaim transfer and the power of attorney clause," I said. "It removes my interest and grants immediate control." My mother leaned forward, squinting at the paper. "That is not how I understood it," she said. Mark spoke quickly. "It is just technical language," he said. "It doesn't mean anything unless something happens." "That is not accurate," I said. Daniel glanced at the document, then back at me. "So you're saying you do not consent," he said. "I am saying I will not sign under pressure, and I will not give up my legal rights." Mark leaned closer, his voice dropping. "If you walk out of here without signing, people will know why this family broke apart." I met his eyes. "You already told them," I said. Jenna tried again, her voice softer. "Do you really want to live with this, knowing your mother is suffering?" I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to explain, to reassure. I let it pass. "I am not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. I am responsible for my decisions." I reached into my bag again and placed my phone on the table. "There's one more thing," I said. "I recorded our last meeting." My mother gasped. "You recorded us?" She said. "Yes, I did, because I was being pressured to sign. Statements were made that matter." Mark stood abruptly. "This is unbelievable. You cannot do that." Daniel raised his hand. "Please sit down. If there is any indication that consent is not voluntary, I cannot proceed." Silence settled over the room. My mother looked at me differently then, not angry, not pleading, just startled. "You planned this," she said. "I prepared," I said. Mark's confidence fractured. His words came faster now, less controlled. "This was never meant to hurt you," he said. "It doesn't have to be intentional to cause harm," I replied. Daniel closed the folder in front of him. "Without clear and voluntary consent, there will be no signing today." He stood, signaling the end. No one argued. There was nothing left to say. I gathered my papers and stood as well. My hands were steady. As I walked toward the door, I did not feel triumphant. I felt lighter. Outside, the cold air filled my lungs. I sat in my car and let the silence settle. Nothing had been resolved the way my family wanted, but the pattern had been interrupted, and that was enough to carry me forward. Chapter 5. What I kept by walking away. I stayed away not because I was angry, but because I finally understood what staying had been costing me. The weeks after the meeting unfolded without confrontation. There were no dramatic messages, no legal threats, no apologies either. What came instead was distance, and with it, information that reached me through side doors I no longer guarded. A former neighbor mentioned that Mark had been frustrated trying to secure financing. An aunt said my mother had been telling people she felt betrayed. None of it was delivered to me directly, and I did not invite more. For the first time, I let consequences belong to the people who created them. I noticed changes in myself before I noticed anything else. Mornings felt quieter, not easier, just clearer. I drank my coffee without checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped anticipating conversations that never came. The constant low-level tension I had carried for years began to loosen, like a muscle finally allowed to relax. When my mother eventually called, it was brief. Her tone was restrained, careful, as if she were choosing her words the way I always had. She said she was hurt. She said she did not understand why I had involved outsiders. She said families were supposed to handle things internally. I listened without interrupting. I did not correct her version of events. When she paused, I told her I hoped she was well and that I needed time. I said it calmly. I meant it. She did not argue. She ended the call. That was the last direct conversation we had. Summer arrived, and with it a chance to rearrange more than just my schedule. I moved into a new apartment on the other side of town, not far enough to feel like running away, just far enough to feel like starting over. The place was smaller, brighter, with windows that faced the morning instead of the street. I unpacked slowly, intentionally. I let boxes sit until I knew where things belonged. For years, I had made my spaces easy for other people to enter. This time, I made one that fit me. Work took on a different shape as well. I accepted a new role within my department, one that came with more responsibility but clearer boundaries. The work was demanding but honest. Problems had definitions, solutions had limits. There was relief in that structure. One evening, I met my friend Claire by the lake. We walked along the path as the sun dipped low, the water calm and expansive beside us. "You seem settled," she said after a while. Not relieved, settled. I told her it felt like I had stopped negotiating my place in my own life. She smiled and said that sounded expensive, but worth it. She shared that she had recently declined a family request she would have accepted without hesitation before. She said it felt uncomfortable, but nothing terrible happened. The reaction she feared never came. The world stayed intact. It struck me then how quietly strength spreads, not through confrontation, but through permission.
When one person steps out of a pattern, it becomes easier for others to imagine doing the same. I heard less and less about my family as the months passed. Mark and his wife adjusted their plans. My mother leaned into her social circles. Life moved forward without my participation, and for the first time, that did not feel like loss. I had spent so long believing that love meant endurance, that being reasonable would eventually be rewarded, that if I stayed calm enough, patient enough, things would resolve themselves. What I learned instead was that calm without boundaries invites exploitation. Walking away did not strip me of family. It stripped me of the role I had been playing without consent. I still mourn that role sometimes, the version of me who believed she could earn fairness by being agreeable. Letting go of that hope was painful, but it also created space. Space for rest, space for clarity, space for choices that did not require justification. I sleep more deeply now. I make decisions without rehearsing explanations. I say no when I need to, and yes when I want to. Not defiantly, just honestly. Revenge, I have learned, does not have to be loud to be effective. Karma does not announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as quiet distance, as consequences unfolding without your involvement. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply withdrawing your cooperation. If you are listening to this and recognize yourself in any part of it, if you have ever been pressured to sacrifice your peace for the sake of family harmony, I hope you hear this clearly. You do not have to prove your love through self-erasure. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to prepare. You are allowed to choose yourself without apology. And if this story gave you language for something you have been carrying quietly, stay with this space. There are more stories like this here, not about anger, but about clarity, boundaries, and the strength that comes from finally standing on your own side.